Thank you all for joining us in this webinar to discuss ESG and 2030 agenda. Today's conversation is part of a series of debates and conversation that our company, Imagem Corporativa, is organizing to celebrate its 20th anniversary. The celebration takes place in times that require more than ever dialogue, common sense, and constructive ideas aimed at the interest of the Brazilian society. In the coming weeks, other webinars will be held to address relevant topics such as health, education, innovation, future of work. Well, I'm very, very glad to welcome today Dan Thomas for this conversation about the ESG and 2030 agenda. Dan has more than 20 years building bridges and partnering to communicate about sustainability, business and development, global health, climate action, humanitarian emergencies, and innovative finance. Dan served as spokesperson for the Gavi Alliance, a public-private partnership founded by UNICEF, World Health Organization, World Bank, and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The Gavi Alliance is dedicated to supporting poor populations through vaccination and immunization projects. Dan also served as communication professional at UNICEF. He led communications and strategic events for the UN Global Compact, and he is now Chief Communication Officer of the Global Compact, with many responsibilities in the international arena and sustainable development goals, our ODSs in Brazil. During our conversations, all participants may address questions to Dan by using the chat in our Zoom system. So thank you again, Dan. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Ciro, and hello, everybody. Good morning. I'm dialing in from just outside New York, where the Global Compact is headquartered, with the Secretary General and the rest of the UN headquarters. And it's a great pleasure. Congratulations on your 20th anniversary, Ciro. And we're very pleased to be here today and to partner with you. But before I spoke, I was keen to show you a film which we just made, a corporate film, our newest corporate film. We've just celebrated 21 years since the UN Secretary General at the time, Kofi Annan, created the UN Global Compact. He did that in a speech in Davos at the World Economic Forum more than 21 years ago, where he proposed to partner with the private sector. He said that the UN should really reach out to the private sector and create this partnership based on shared values. And that's how the UN Global Compact was born. And immediately, about 40 leading CEOs went up to him and said, well, where do we sign up to this idea? And he said, well, let's create an office, let's create the beginning of what has now become the UN Global Compact, which is a commitment from CEOs to the Secretary General to live up to 10 principles, which are based on human rights principles, labor rights principles, protecting the environment, and fighting corruption. And that's how CEOs sign up to the UN Global Compact. And 21 years later, we're going strong, stronger than ever, under new leadership. And we have about just over 13,000 companies are now part of the UN Global Compact, and about 3,000 non-business organizations. But to celebrate our 21st birthday, in some ways, I don't know about Brazil, but in many parts of the world, when you reach the age of 21, you're kind of considered a proper adult. And so we feel that we've reached our adulthood. We're ready to really take off into the next chapter of our existence. And we made this film to really explain where we've come from, how we've built, and where we're going. So maybe we can start with the film, Ciro.
As a human family, we've had an enormous wake-up call to how connected we are with a tiny little virus that comes along and shuts us down.
We all live in this world together. The same blood flows in me and any other person.
We're facing the challenges of an ecosystem that is stressed. Things are not moving as fast as they should. Things are improving, but not as fast as they should.
The challenges that we are facing, they are materializing so fast that it's not only my children or grandchildren which will experience the consequences if we fail.
To do it, we need to do it together. Collaboration, north, south, east, west, black, brown, white. Strengthen the diversity of the human family is what we need right now to get us past this incredibly difficult time. Might sound like it's impossible, but that's what we work towards, making the impossible possible.
20 years ago, a small group of United Nations and business leaders came up with a visionary proposal.
I propose that you, the business leaders here gathered in Davos, and we, the United Nations, initiate a global compact of shared values and principles which will give a human face to the global market.
I always say part of Kofi Annan's genius was he invited business, but he also addressed civil society and labor organizations.
The mission of the United Nations Global Compact is to mobilize companies around the world to align their operations and strategies with 10 universal principles in the areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption.
The UN represents the body that aims to drive international cooperation and drive peace and security for humanity. And I think it unifies all of society around this set of 17 goals.
Our objectives cannot be met if the private sector doesn't play a fundamental role. And so the Global Compact is a platform in which all those businesses that abide by the principles of, and values of the United Nations and of the Charter to work together, representing the best of humankind.
For the last 2 decades, the initiative has grown to encompass local networks in more than 60 countries, engaging directly with over 10,000 companies.
The local networks are our global footprint around the world, and they work with us to translate the 10 principles as well as the Sustainable Development Goals into actionable pieces of work for businesses globally.
It is so decided.
Since 2015, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement have provided the most powerful common agenda that the world has ever seen, with an essential role spelled out for business.
L'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.
Any business that continues to operate under its own self-interest will not be around very long. So businesses that have a strong purpose, that understand how they can make society better, will be embraced by society and will be around for a long time.
Be the change that you want to see in business.
I truly believe that companies who do not put sustainability, the SDGs, in their strategies, they're going to disappear.
The mindset of consumers has changed. They increasingly want to buy from companies that are contributing to society as a whole.
Business must be part of the solution in when we address these big global problems.
The focus has shifted to both the short term and the long term, both doing well and doing good, making profits and making a change. This is a reality of the world now. Leaders need to lead sustainably.
The United Nations Global Compact is leading the transformation ahead, challenging companies to take more ambitious action on the Sustainable Development Goals.
I think it's absolutely impossible to face the challenges of today, the very quick change that is happening, without having the youth leading the way and helping us define the right strategies, the right policies, the right approaches to address the global problems.
The world is waking up, and change is coming whether you like it or not.
The world today has got more opportunities than it has the challenges that can be overcome by the opportunities that we have.
You find people in the most desperate of situations, determined to fight for a better future. That's the kind of world I want.
What has changed in a very short period of time is that the narrative is different, and that is fantastic.
If you want to have a good business, you have to mobilize people. A business is a sum of people working to something.
More and more people realize that sustainability is really about making the pie bigger, better, and more inclusive.
I hope in the future all businesses in the world will think about their own purpose. Business can only exist when they have a purpose.
We've got to show progress. We've got to reverse what's happening.
I see the Global Compact as an incredible organization working together with businesses to build a more sustainable world.
We are united across the globe, for the globe. We're united despite our challenges, no matter how daunting the task may seem. We are united by possibilities because this is bigger than one business, because we are better together. We all have the same job. We are united in the business of a better world.
So it's a great video. It gives us a very good picture on what is going on in the whole world these days. So my first question for you, Dan, is what in this context, what are the conditions and the main challenges of SDGs and the 2030 agenda in this very complex world we are living now?
Well, thank you for the question, Ciro. I mean, you can see that the world is in a very difficult place right now. I mean, there's all kinds of things going on which require our attention, and the private sector clearly has a very important role to play in helping the governments of the world, helping societies to deal with the challenges that we face. I mean, number one, the climate crisis is getting worse and worse. And that is something that we're seeing, you know, a huge interest of companies and businesses all around the world to play their part in being part of the solution to the climate crisis. That's going to require an all-of-society approach in order to get the world back on track and to keep global warming, you know, below 1.5 degrees, acceptable levels that we can live with, you know, as a human race on this planet. Couldn't be more serious than that. We're also dealing with a COVID-19 pandemic, which, you know, more than a year later, I don't know about you, but I've been working from home for almost 18 months now, since March last year, still not really going back to work, still not really living in the way that I lived, you know, before the pandemic, not traveling, not going to restaurants, you know. We're all dealing with that. COVID-19 has created all kinds of, you know, issues that we're dealing with as a society, and we've all had to adapt in many ways. And, you know, we've seen, you know, increasing gender-based violence, for example, as a result of the lockdowns and people being forced to work from home, all kinds of issues to do with COVID. Clearly, it's had a a massive drag on the economy and economic activity. A lot of people have lost their jobs. You know, a huge effect of that. You know, plus all the other sort of societal issues that have raised themselves to our attention, increasing concern about racism and anti-discrimination. These are key areas that the private sector needs to pay attention to. So in terms of the SDGs, I mean, the deadline is 2030. We're, you know, 1/3 of the way through since 2015, when the SDGs, the ODS, you call them in Brazil, were agreed by 193 member states at the United Nations. They don't belong to the UN, these goals. These goals were agreed by 193 government leaders at the United Nations. And frankly, you know, we're not on track at the moment to achieve those goals, those 17 sustainable development goals, which are part of that 2030 agenda for sustainable development. So we're not on track. The COVID-19 has been a big drag on that progress that we thought we were making. And clearly we have an awful lot of work to do as a society, as a global society, as local societies and communities, to fix the world that we currently occupy. And of course, you know, we believe that principled business, the private sector, enlightened business leaders, not just CEOs, but business leaders across companies, can play a huge role in changing the world around them, leading their businesses and their societies to a better place. And we also believe that that will be more profitable, that they will actually make more money and be more successful if they embrace this global agenda and ESG into their mindset, into the way they run their businesses. And we're making the case of the Global Compact, not only in Brazil, through our very strong network in Brazil, where we have you know, a really good, strong network of Brazilian companies, but globally as well. We're in you know, more than 80 or 90 countries with about 70 local networks. We just launched another one today, this morning, in Saudi Arabia. We're working with companies in more than 80 countries to help them embrace the 10 principles, the idea that they're part of the solution, and that they, through their business and through their work, they can actually drive the world into a better, more sustainable, safer place.
But then the Sustainable Development Goals, they encompass 17 different dimensions, ranging from no poverty and zero hunger to clean energy and sustainable cities, from gender equality to justice and strong institutions, from climate action to quality education and decent work. So question is it possible to say at this point that some dimensions have engaged more civil society, companies, and government than others? And if so, what should be done towards dimensions that have lacked stronger engagement?
Well, thank you for the question, Cyril. And it's a good one, because there are, as you say, there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, ODS, 17 of them. But what we're finding at the UN Global Compact and at the UN in general is that people, wherever they are, whether they're business people, I mean, anyone in society, we're finding that the SDGs touch everybody in some way. And so it really depends on you know, your interests and what moves you. But they connect with everybody, even if they don't know it. I mean, for example, you know, if you have 4 daughters, as a father, you're going to be much more interested in gender equality, because you want your daughters to succeed in society as they grow up, and you want them to have all the opportunities that you want for your daughters. If you enjoy surfing or snorkeling or scuba diving, you're going to be interested in protecting the ocean and making sure that the ocean is protected, that we're not polluting it with plastic, that the fish that you catch are going to be, fit for consumption. So we're finding that everybody, wherever they are, they have an interest in one or more of these goals. But I think I'd like to give you two examples of goals, SDGs, that have resonated most with the UN Global Compact companies that we work for. And let me give you those examples. One is gender equality, SDG 5. This is a really important goal. And we found a huge interest from our companies in wanting to embrace gender equality, wanting to create an environment for their business and their leadership where women are part of the solution, are very much part of the decision-making process, getting more women into leadership roles and onto their boards, for example. And we've been able to show companies that not only is advancing gender equality the right thing to do, it's also good for business and a key component of achieving all of the sustainable development goals. We have research from Morgan Stanley, for example, that shows that companies with high female representation have annual returns of 3 percentage points higher than other companies. Women's leadership in business is linked to better ESG performance, including things like reduced greenhouse gas emissions, stronger relationships with the workers, reduced incidents of fraud and corruption, insider trading, and other unethical practices. And we're working with companies, offering them an accelerator program right now, which has been extremely popular with all the companies that we work with, to help them target gender equality and really enable companies to set and reach ambitious corporate targets for women's representation in leadership. And we've seen more than 300 companies really embracing this approach in 44 countries. That is a program that we offer to companies to help them really think through in their own way. I mean, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. Every company has to figure out what is best for them. But we're finding that increasingly companies are keen to ensure that the gender equality is built into the business and can actually, as we say, can actually help them become, more successful and more profitable. Another example I wanted to give you that companies are extremely interested in is SDG 13, climate action. Now, this is obviously a big year for climate action. 5 years after the Paris Agreement on climate was agreed, we're building up to another COP26 in Glasgow in Scotland, hosted by my country, the United Kingdom. And that's going to be a critical meeting for the world's leaders, governments, to decide how they're going to tackle this extraordinary threat of the climate change crisis. We're facing a climate emergency with irreversible impacts on people and the natural systems, biodiversity that sustain us. Global temperatures are already up 1.1 degrees Celsius, and they're set to rise more than 3 degrees above pre-industrial levels by the end of this century. So that level of temperature rise, global warming, will have catastrophic consequences for all of us, for the planet. And so, as a human race, we have to stop that. And we're finding that all the companies we work with are very keen to put in place concrete plans so that they, as businesses, can contribute to the solution, that they can work with their governments, they can work together to contribute to reducing those greenhouse gas emissions. We've led a campaign called Business Ambition for 1.5 degrees Celsius. And we've had more than 700 of the world's largest companies signing up to set science-based targets to keep their emissions in line with a 1.5 degree level of global warming, and ultimately to reach a net zero commitment, net zero emissions by mid-century, by 2050. So you can see, what a challenge the world has, but the private sector is extremely important, and we're seeing real leadership from business leaders all around the world, and that's incredibly encouraging. But clearly, even more ambition is needed to keep the world safe.
And by the way, you have just mentioned the COP26 in Glasgow in November. Do you foresee that this COP26 can be a special moment to discuss this concerning environment we are living in? I explained. We have seen in the last few days and weeks floods in Europe, fire in California, drought in Brazil, social and political disruption in some regions of the world, concern alerts of global warming coming from the IPCC. So it seems that the level of the complexity of our challenges are being multiplied. So what the COP26 will be able to implement, to decide, to make become a reality?
It's a great question, Ciro, and the world's leaders are relying on this COP26 in Glasgow, as you say, in November, as a critical moment in history for them to come together to take stock of where the world is, and to make decisions about how we can move forward as a global community, as a family of nations. The IPCC issued a report very recently, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and you probably saw it, which had very alarming news for us. The world scientists got together and have told us in a very plain way what we face if we do not address this challenge as a global family. The Secretary General called it a code red alert for humanity, which it is. And of course, none of this is new. I mean, what is new is that it seems to be getting worse and worse as a crisis, not better and better. But we've known about this for a long time. But the question is, can the world's governments and businesses and civil society come together this year in November to make really strong commitments and firm commitments to address this challenge? That's what we're hoping for. Of course, COVID-19, which is disrupting so much of our life, so much of what we do, is also threatening that meeting. But the British government, seem determined to go ahead with it and to convene the world's leaders. But once again, the private sector has a huge role to play in not only playing their part to reduce their emissions, but also working with their governments and putting pressure on their governments to create the conditions so that all businesses, with a level playing field, all businesses can do the right thing and be part of the solution. It couldn't be a more critical time for the world. And this is the year where we really need to address this global challenge.
There's a question here from Sarita Venancio. She works for a French global company called Arkema. She works for the company here in Brazil. She asks you, she addresses you one question. She says, I'm a leader of a female project named Marie. I would like to ask you, how can we, who work in multinational companies, could impact other business unities around the world being based in Brazil? How to multiply that effort?
Well, that sounds like a really great effort. And I think, the world's a smaller place these days. A good idea in Brazil or in any country can become a global phenomenon. And so I would encourage you to work with us, work through our network of companies. We have more than 13,000 companies now signed up to the Global Compact. And, I would say, many of those companies are aware of their gender equality issues. They're increasingly aware that gender equality and female leadership can actually bring a really strong dimension to every business, can make business more profitable, more harmonious, more engaging, less corrupt, as I've mentioned. And so that's an area of increasing interest. So I think I would encourage you to work with our local network in Brazil, see how that can be scaled up, and perhaps that can be a global phenomenon. If it works in Brazil, why shouldn't it work in other countries?
Interesting that this conversation lead us to a topic, communication. You were Chief Communication Officer of Global Compact, and we live in a world society in which fake news and disinformation spread all over. And by the way, there's a piece in the New York Times today. The title is, "This is the moment the anti-vaccine movement has been waiting for." So there are so many disinformation and fake news, and we work on a communication field. How to play our role in an efficient way as communicators in a complex environment of fake news, disinformation, how to deal with that?
It's a very good question, and it's a real challenge for all communicators. I'd like to think, I would say this because I'm a communicator too. I think communications is really so important these days, more important than ever. And I think the role of the communicators in a company, the chief communications officer, the communications teams, is an increasingly important role. And I think we're seeing that CEOs are really relying on their communication colleagues to help them not only advise them on the challenges that all businesses face, but increasingly communicate the purpose and mission of the company in this new world where ESG is increasingly important to a company's reputation and success. And so I think this is a new growing opportunity for us as communicators to get involved in really the running of the business. We're not just there to sort of give a message, we're there to advise our CEOs, our leaders, on how to address these challenges, how to play our role in a broader conversation about society, about the challenges that the world's facing, challenges like climate action, challenges like gender inequality, challenges like racial discrimination. These are big items that all of society is concerned about. And as businesses, it's going to be critical that businesses have a position and are able to communicate their purpose and their mission in addressing these challenges. We're seeing increasingly that all the stakeholders of a business, the shareholders, the customers, the staff increasingly, have a huge interest in understanding what is the purpose, what is the mission of the company. It's no longer good enough just to sell a product. Everybody's looking for a product that they can believe in, that they can feel good about, that they can buy with a good feeling. And so they're looking to communicators to explain, why this product is a good product, what's behind it, what's the mission of the company, why should I support that company with my money? Is this a company that believes in the things that I care about? Is this a company that's addressing the climate crisis, or are they contributing to the climate crisis? And increasingly, people want to know this stuff. And so I think there's a real opportunity for communicators and professionals in the PR world to play a really important role in business these days. And certainly this conversation about ESG, sustainability, and really improving the world and taking on these challenges that we face.
More and more, we see that there's a urgency in tackle some issues like the global warming or climate change. Mr. Michael Bloomberg, which happens to be a former New York mayor and a business leader, very deeply committed to the sustainability topics. He has criticized the position of some countries that promise that by 2050 they will be net zero. And he has said, so 2050 is far away. We need to implement more urgent decisions, actions. We need to face the climate change in a more aggressive way. How do you see that kind of positioning? I mean, there are some countries and regions focused in 2035, other ones 2040, China 2050. So how to match those goals with the urgency required about climate change?
That's a really good question, because with these far-off deadlines, it's easy for a company to say that they will be net zero by 2050. We're finding a huge interest from companies all over the world who want help in how they can reach those targets. Those targets, as you say, are a long way off into the future. And what we're doing increasingly is helping companies to set the goals now, today, that they can start working towards those targets so that they will achieve net zero by 2040, 2050, whatever the target that they're setting for themselves. Clearly, the British government, COP26, the UN, is calling for net zero by 2050 in order to keep global warming under control. That is the target that the scientists are telling us has to be achieved. We're not going to face, the catastrophic consequences of global warming. And so we're finding that, we're offering very practical guidance through things like our partners at the Science Based Target Initiative, which is an organization that we helped create in 2015 after the Paris Agreement. We're helping companies to set the targets now so that they're making the right decisions now so that they will be able to achieve the targets. And that kind of, those incremental steps that they need to take now as businesses are very necessary, because the action has to begin today, not in 2050.
My feeling is that the catastrophic consequences of global warming, as you mentioned, may become geopolitical issues, geopolitical problems in the short, midterm. How do you see that? Because we are talking about migration and lack of jobs and huge social impact. How do you see that? Is there a risk that this situation become a geopolitical issue?
Well, it's already become a geopolitical issue. We've seen the effects of droughts in certain parts of the world. I mean, many people believe that the Syrian conflict was as a direct result of drought and climate change. Farmers leaving their land because the land was no longer productive, to move into the cities. Having moved into the cities, they then rubbed up against the populations living in the cities. Conflict arose. Suddenly, the whole of Syria is in conflict. Millions of Syrians leaving the country and have been for the last 7 years, looking for homes in other places. That's a long way from Brazil, but you can imagine all of the countries in Europe and the Middle East facing this extraordinary exodus from Syria as a result of conflict created by climate change. Increasingly, we're going to see this, the increasing droughts that we're seeing around the world. And we're working with companies, for example, on water resilience. We have some of the world's leading brands working with us in a water resilience coalition to make sure that water is protected, is resilient, is shared. These are CEOs who recognize that their companies rely on the water in certain water basins, understanding that their business relies on that water, but at the same time, they need to share that water with the farmers, with the local communities as well. And so these are far-sighted business leaders who are really looking to the future to figure out, okay, well, in a world which is going to be increasingly affected by the climate crisis, how are we going to make sure that the water sources are resilient going forwards, because they recognize that without it, their business will no longer be able to function, and will be heavily impacted if there's conflict around sort of scarce resources like water. So it's a real challenge, and I think the sooner all of us working in business and of course in any field, the sooner we start connecting the dots between what is actually happening in the world around us. It may not be happening in our community or anywhere we live or close to where we live, but it's happening everywhere else. And so, it's only going to get more dramatic and get worse. And increasingly, we're seeing the weather changing as a result of the climate crisis. There still seems to be a connection between these increasingly kind of violent weather events, hurricanes, typhoons, cyclones we're seeing around the world. And, we can see for ourselves what an impact that has on our communities and, of course, on our businesses as well. And so we need to factor that in as we work forward. And frankly, if that wasn't a wake-up call to the world and to all of us, I don't know what could be, what will wake us up.
Okay, so we know that the Global Compact has in the corporate field an important pillar. At the same time, we know that, and this is another question coming here, and we know that companies have limited finance resources. So how to guarantee that the resources are being allocated in the most urgent issues? How to promote this match?
I think that's really a question of leadership. I mean, the leaders of a company, from the CEO down, have to make these decisions about where they put their investment. And clearly, government policy can encourage those investments. That's why, it's so important that the governments put in place policies to encourage business leaders to make the right investments, to help them move towards systems and energy, which is, that will protect the environment, not harm the environment. Incentivize investment in, clean energy, for example, and give companies a level playing field. I mean, this is one of the things that we hear a lot from forward-thinking business leaders, is that they just want the playing field to be level. They want it to be the same for them as their rivals. it's hard to make a big investment in something if your rivals aren't having to make the same investment. And so that's why government policy is so important. And this is why it's important that business leaders are advocating and putting pressure on governments to play their role in this. But I think the other part of the question is, we're seeing, for example, another example, we're seeing that we're engaging increasingly with chief financial officers. There was a day when chief financial officers weren't very interested in ESG or sustainability. They didn't see it as their role to think about those things. But increasingly today, we're seeing a large number of forward-thinking, enlightened chief financial officers who are embracing sustainability, seeing it as the future of the company. And of course, as the decision makers and the holders of the money and the finances, they're able to direct and advise the leadership of companies on where to invest in sustainability to ensure that the business has a long-term future and that the business will be part of a solution and play its role in actually creating a more stable world, which in turn will create a more profitable business. And we're seeing that increasingly. In the same way that I hope that more and more chief communication officers and people who care about communication are also sort of seeing the opportunity, stepping up to the plate and becoming part of the solution as well. So I think it's really a mindset thing. It's a leadership thing. And we're seeing encouraging signs from leaders, business leaders all over the world who see their role not just as ensuring that the shareholders get the good returns, that the bottom line is strong, but actually thinking in a more holistic way about the future of the company, the sustainability of the business, and the communities that support the business and the communities that the business has grown out of. Because, that community is really important. Workers, the shareholders, the customers, making sure that they are also protected, safe, economically viable, educated. This is all part of creating a sustainable world.
In order to achieve that more sustainable world, we need to think about whether we like it or not, politics. We are living in a polarized world. We see that in the US, we see that in Brazil, we see some tensions coming from other regions, other political tensions. So it seems that the global field is not so peaceful as it used to be by the time COP21 celebrated a global agreement in Paris. True or not? How to deal with that, with those political tensions that in a way or another impact global solutions of common interest?
Well, I think what I would say about that is that it's true that we're seeing increasing nationalism, increasing self-interest from nations. This is a challenge for us at the United Nations, where we're trying to get all countries together to reach agreements on things like global challenges like climate change, a national sort of system of agreements. So it's increasingly hard, but increasingly, businesses are rising to the challenge and actually sort of continuing while these arguments are going on. At the end of the day, business will continue. A lot of businesses are global, just by the nature of their supply chains. They're present they have staff or suppliers in many countries of the world. And of course, it's in their interests to create a system where they can negotiate, they can cooperate, they can buy and sell in a stable world. And so, if anything, this sort of fracturing, this competitive political environment that we're seeing, increasingly seeing, this nationalism that we're seeing as well. If anything, it's disrupting business. It's disruptive to a sort of stable business environment. And so I think, we're seeing business leaders really sort of stepping up as leaders of society, as leaders of their communities. And increasingly, I mean, there was I don't know whether you get this in Brazil, I'm sure you do, the Edelman Trust Barometer, which is an annual exercise engaging the various levels that people have, the trust that they have in various institutions and leadership. And in the last Edelman Trust Barometer, we saw that business leaders are actually more respected and more trusted than some political leaders, partly because they are stepping up and really leading in a way that we haven't seen before. And so I think, any ambitious, enlightened business person has an opportunity to actually kind of show leadership on global issues that society faces, whether it's tackling the climate crisis or tackling racism and the inequality crisis, whether it's standing up for gender equality and saying, this is what we need for a sustainable business which will serve the community as well as be a profitable venture. And we're seeing that those leaders are succeeding and are increasingly respected and trusted by communities and by society. So there's an opportunity, as politicians bicker and argue with each other, there's an opportunity for business leaders to step up to the challenge and to really drive their own enlightened agenda.
Okay, we have time for one more question. There was a question coming from Adriana Miranda from the audience. She asks you, she makes a comment and she addresses a question. She says, some corporations that use ESG in Brazil participate with solidarity and sustainable actions in front of the pandemic event. Our path to sustainable practices sometimes runs through the lack of awareness of private and institutional organizations. The crisis our country undergoes shows that we will not fulfill the 2030 agenda. What is your perception of the need for a more inclusive society?
Well, I think it's a very good question, and it's the challenge that we all face. Not only in Brazil, but in all countries, in the United States, in the United Kingdom, which is where I grew up. It's a constant challenge. But we have in the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda, ODS, you call it, we have a roadmap that was agreed by 193 government leaders at the United Nations in 2015, a roadmap that sets a vision for the world and for all communities to work towards, sets some targets as well. So there are clear targets as to what we need to achieve. And, if we can all play our part as in the private sector, the public sector, in moving towards that agreed targets, then at least we can feel that we're moving in the right direction. Yes, it's frustrating. COVID has been, a huge challenge to all of us on this planet, and it's set us back. Let's face it, it set us back in many ways. It's also been an opportunity. It's been an opportunity to rethink the way we live, to rethink the way we work, to rethink our systems, to think about all kinds of changes that we can make. So perhaps, COVID in some ways has a silver lining. Perhaps it's the knock on the door that we needed to change our thinking and to start thinking in a more sustainable way. We'd like to think so at the UN. We are, remaining positive. We work with all kinds of people, all kinds of governments. Some are more cooperative than others. Some are more collaborative than others. And that is the challenge that we all face. If there are certain challenges in this world that I've said, which do require an all of society, all of global approach, otherwise we can't fix those. Climate change is one of those. Inequality is another. Racism is another. Fighting corruption, that's another one. I mean, these are huge challenges, and we feel that by working together in a positive, collaborative way, we can overcome these challenges. We won't give up, and I'm sure, in your own way, you'll see the value of continuing to work in this direction. I hope so.
So Dan, we know that your agenda is very busy. I do appreciate. I want to appreciate your comments and your answers, and I thank you again for having accepted our invitation. And I want to finish our conversation with one final comment from you about the following. We still have 3 minutes. Very often we talked about ESG and the 2030 agenda with people with the same beliefs we have. So how to address people that are not concerned about climate change so far, are not committed to ESG, because it seems that we need more people committed to the topics. And we should address information to people who are not yet convinced. What would you say to that type of people?
Well, I mean, we're communicators, so that's our challenge and our opportunity. If we do a good job, we can engage everybody that we want to engage in this opportunity and in these challenges and in this sort of fight that we're all in to create the world that we want, a better world, a more sustainable world. I think with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, as I said, I think they do touch every single person on this planet. They touch them in a meaningful way, in some ways. And it's just a question of trying to find that connection. What is it people care about? And then you'll find that there is actually a goal and a global strategy in place, agreed by our leaders, agreed unanimously by 193 global leaders to address those challenges. So whether it's whatever the situation, that you can find a way to connect it with people. And once people are engaged in it and they understand that there are solutions, that it's not just a hopeless situation, there are solutions, that their governments, the companies that they buy from or employ them are actually working towards the solutions that can lift everybody up and can also give everybody a common direction, that they can feel that they can play their part, however small, in contributing to the world that's envisioned by this 2030 agenda, which is a better, more sustainable world in which no one's left behind. That's what we're aiming for.
Thank you, Dan. Again, thank you for the audience, for people who join us for this conversation. I hope that we can meet again virtually or in person in the near future. Thank you very much, Dan Thomas.
Thank you for having me, Cyril. Good luck and happy anniversary.
Okay, thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.